SSI Motorsports team owner Todd Burns has done a lengthy interview with FloRacing's Kevin Kovac, where he discusses what happened between him and Ricky Thornton Jr. that resulted in the two splitting ways, with Ricky Thornton Jr. announcing he was joining Kohler Motorsports earlier this week, and Burns revealing that Hudson O'Neal will be replacing Ricky Thornton Jr. in his car. Before we get to this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at John Trent Racing. Also, hit that like button so more people see this and we get through that YouTube algorithm. Before we get to this interview as well, I want to go back to this post here, the press release announcing that Ricky Thornton Jr. and SSI Motorsports were parting ways. This will be something that Burns talks about in the interview, specifically what Ricky Thornton Jr. says. And this is what Ricky Thornton Jr. said. He said, Todd Burns and I met today. He expressed that he felt the last few months hadn't been going in the direction that he envisioned for SSI Motorsports and has decided to hire another driver. So just want to keep that in mind. Wanted to point that out because Burns does indeed discuss that here in this interview over at FloRacing.com. I will have the link in the description below in case you want to read it afterwards or read it for yourself. But this is what Burns had to say, beginning with his split with Ricky Thornton Jr. He says that this is not really the way I like to do headlines for sure. It's the furthest thing from what we set out to do this year. It's definitely not been planned or anything at all. So he's saying that this was not planned. He seemingly doesn't like kind of maybe the way that it went down. This is not really the way I like to do headlines for sure. But he does kind of get into the details here. And he does say that he recognizes that anyone outside his tight circle of trust will always have a hard time comprehending how he could, right in the middle of yet another wonderful season, break up his all-pro combination of Ricky Thornton Jr., crew chief Anthony Burrows, and crew members DJ Williams and Justin Tharp. In fact, he says there's no explanation that he could offer to assuage all the observers left dumbstruck by the news. This is what he specifically had to say. We're not going to release the whys and why nots. That's between us and personal. We both have an admiration for each other, I hope, and it's a life lesson learned. Let's put it that way. So that sounds pretty ominous. We're not going to release the whys and why nots, but it's between us and personal, and it's a life lesson learned. So what happened? He's not going to tell us. But he goes on and says this, but we have nothing bad to say about Ricky at all. He's a heck of a wheelman and a great guy, and we wish him the very best. We both talked on Sunday, and we shook hands, and he told me he appreciated it, all I've done for him. And I said, hey, you've done the same for me, so we appreciate it. It went both ways, and I hope we've done good for each other. So that's where we left it. He then asserted that his decision, quote, didn't have anything to do with personality conflicts within the team, noting that everyone got along great. There were other factors at play that aren't for public consumption. And this is how he explained this. Just as a businessman, I know that all the car owners that I've talked to so far, my close friends and things who have called me and reached out, I've explained to them a bit, and they've been in the same situation that I have. I've never been in this situation exactly like this as far as racing, but in my construction company and stuff, I've had to let people go that I really, really hated to let go, but I had to make a choice and go forward with things, and it was really, really tough. This one here, it's been difficult. I mean, it's been really, really difficult. It was just a fluke type deal. Fluke type deal. That's an interesting way of putting it. You remember he previously said it was a life lesson learned. Now he's calling it a fluke type deal. I mean, there's a lot to it. It's just it's just not one little thing. I'll put it that way. I'm trying to be as honest as I possibly can without saying a whole lot because I know that things get out there and misconstrued. But that's what people don't understand. People that are not in business, people that are not in control of people or have a business themselves, they have no clue of what it takes to run a business and what we as owners of companies and things have to deal with on a day-to-day basis and year-to-year basis and go on forward. So I already have massive misgivings here. I don't understand why he's he's saying this. Like, why even do this interview in the first place, or at least do this portion of the interview? I think he should have just stopped here where he's like, we're not going to release the whys and why nots. You've seen the press release from Ricky Thornton Jr. We've announced a replacement in Hudson O'Neal. We're moving forward with Hudson O'Neal. Let's go race him. Like, why even get into all of this stuff? Why kind of beat around the bush? Especially if you're saying here, you don't want to kind of like get in the muck. You don't want people to misconstrue things. I think you should have just kept it simple. Said like, hey, we split ways with Ricky Thornton Jr. He released his press release. We have now hired Hudson O'Neal, and we are moving forward with Hudson O'Neal, and we are chasing the Lucas Oil Late Model Dirt Championship, and we hope to win this year. That is our goal. And I think you just move forward from there, and then you start talking about what your plans are with Hudson O'Neal and what the strategy is and what you plan to do there. I think that is what you should have done. Instead, he went around and did all of this beating around the bush. I don't want to misconstrue things, et cetera, et cetera. I'm trying to be honest, but I can't really say anything. That just, as far as I'm concerned, that just looks like you are trying to misdirect, or you don't actually want to say what happened. Either we split up, we're moving forward, that's it, or say what happened. I think those are the better options. I don't think this option that he chose here is a good option. I just don't think it's a good option. And then kind of like saying that, oh, people can't understand the situation because they're not in business or whatever. I just don't really buy that. I think people can indeed understand that, even if they haven't been in business, if they haven't been managers, etc. People are able to understand making difficult decisions like this without having to gone through it in the first place. I have gone through that, so I do understand making those hard decisions sometimes, but I don't know. I just don't think this is the way he should have gone about this, in my opinion. I don't think it reflects well on him, and I think it just raises more questions as to what happened, what really happened. Why are you kind of beating around the bush with this? He then kind of addresses Thornton's press release. Remember, I said that would be key. So this is what he had to say with this. He says, the statement that was brought out and presented earlier with what Ricky said, that I was going to head into a different direction. I mean, if he took it like that, I can't help that. It's not the direction that I wanted to go to for sure. That was absolutely not the truth, because who in their right mind fires a guy who's had so much success? I mean, if that's all it was about, was winning a bunch of races and winning a bunch of money, who in their right mind does that? That's all they want to live for. That's all they want to have their name out there for. So he is now disputing what Ricky Thornton Jr. said in the press release. Again, if you're going to dispute it and then say what your side is. Except he doesn't do that. He just asks a bunch of questions like, why would I really do that? And then he says, but as far as what I'm all about and people who know me very well, there's a few handful who do really know me, car owners and suppliers that supply some of our pieces and parts that know me pretty well, and they know what I'm about. That's the part that people will never know. So he then's like, I'm disputing what you had to say. I don't think that what you said was true, but I'm not actually going to say what my version of it was, or how I actually was thinking about this, but I'm just going to like not tell you. You'll never really know, but people who know me are going to know. And it's like, what? What are you even talking about? Like, what is the point of making this comment? If you're going to say you dispute something, you need to explain why you are disputing it. That's just common sense. You don't need to be a business owner to be honest with people like this. I mean, this is what I'm talking about. The guy is saying that he's trying to be honest, but he's beating around the bush. He's walking around a lot of things. And that doesn't, to me, indicate those are not the actions of someone who is honest. If you're being honest, you're just going to tell them. You're going to tell them right away. Sometimes it might be harsh. Sometimes you can ease people into it. But this guy isn't doing either of them. Mr. Burns, I don't know him. I don't think a lot of people know him. And I just don't think this reflects well on him. I just don't think this is how you go about doing this. If you're going to say you dispute something, dispute it, and then explain why you dispute it. Don't say like, oh, I dispute this, and then ask a bunch of questions that you don't answer, and then say like, oh, people who know me know what I'm all about. It's like, well, why are you even doing this? The whole point is for you to address this, is what it seems like. The whole point of you doing this interview is to address all this stuff, but you're not actually addressing any of it. So I don't even understand the point of doing this. And this goes back to my original advice. He should have just said, we're not going to talk about it. Ricky Thornton Jr. made his press statement. We've announced that Hudson O'Neal is filling in, and we're moving forward with Hudson O'Neal. And if you want to talk about our plans moving forward, let's have at it. But we're not really going to address anything between the fallout with Ricky Thornton Jr. and SSI Motorsports. We're moving forward now. And I think that would have been the better way to handle it. This just raises more questions. It raises a lot more questions. What actually happened? Are you actually telling the truth? I mean, this to me just casts doubt on what he's saying. It doesn't look like what he's doing, beating around the bush here, are not the actions of an honest person. At least in my experience. So he goes on and actually talks about that he did think about starting a two-car team, and it didn't work out. He says, the thing we thought about starting we thought about starting a two-car team, but there were some issues that didn't work out. As a car owner at that time, Hudson was top 2 or 3 in the country as far as coming off driving Mark Richards' Rocket 1 stuff. So what car owner wouldn't be excited about having 2 drivers like that in your stable, so to speak? You're thinking, gosh dang, you're on top of the world a whole lot. It increases your chances of doing good. Whether you're winning or not, there's got to be a loser in a 2-car program, but you're still having some success. And to see when you roll into the racetrack and it's like, hey, here comes the SSI team. These guys are the guys to beat. That was exciting for me to think about at the time. I also don't think that if you have a 2-car program, one of them is going to be a loser. You don't really see that in the NASCAR Cup Series. There's multiple teams that have multiple cars, and a lot of their teams are highly successful. Obviously, you think of Hendricks, you think of Joe Gibbs, you think of Penske. I mean, just look at Penske. Who's won the past 2 NASCAR Cup Series championships? It's been Joey Logano and Ryan Blaney back to back. So the same team has won, but 2 different drivers. Like, I don't think either of them were losers, right? I mean, maybe you can say Blaney was the loser in 2022 and Logano was the loser in 2023. But both of them won championships in back-to-back years. So I don't think there necessarily has to be a loser. That seems to be a weird mentality to think like that one of your teams wouldn't be as good as the other. You'd think you'd want to have both teams performing extraordinarily well and both maybe racing against each other. I mean, Formula One, look at Formula One. Usually you have the manufacturers competing against the same manufacturer having top cars competing against each other to see who's going to be the best. But he goes on and says, it didn't work out, and that's okay. But I don't want something written up about Hudson coming in here and undermining, because that was absolutely not the case. In fact, when I made the phone call to Hudson after the fact, releasing Thornton on Sunday, I mean, he had to think about the ride offer. He didn't jump at the chance right off the get-go on Monday. He had to think things through before he made a decision. So again, this reiterates the point that he is trying to address a lot of these rumors out here. And I don't think he's actually doing that. I mean, sure, he's addressing this one with Hudson O'Neal, but what happened with the split between Ricky Thornton Jr., he definitely did not do that. He just opened up a whole more can of worms. I think that's what he did. He did not do a good job of kind of trying to shut down the rumor mill, which it looks like that's exactly what he was trying to do here. He says, I don't want something written up about Hudson coming in here. So he's clearly trying to address a lot of rumors, speculation, etc. And I don't think he did that at all, again, with Ricky Thornton Jr. I think he opened up a lot more. And then he goes on and talks about a previous relationship with Hudson O'Neal when Hudson O'Neal raced for SSI Motorsports a couple years ago. And then why he was initially thought that he would be a good driver for SSI Motorsports and how he saw Hudson as a son, etc. So they go on and talk about that pretty good here. And then obviously talking about his ride with the Masters built house car in 2020 and how he helped Hudson with that. Obviously wasn't giving him a full ride, but was providing him advice and I guess some help there as well. And then talking about how they brought in Ricky Thornton Jr. After Hudson O'Neal was sidelined to undergo shoulder surgery. And then he kind of says how Hudson kind of established himself with the other team and it was good. So he thought, well, this would be an opportunity. Ricky's shown us he can drive a race car a little bit. He had some learning to do to get a feel for late models, but then it got better and better as years went on, and he became what he become what he is today. He's learned a lot, and it helped that we got Anthony Burrows on board as crew chief in August 2021, and the other guys the last 2 years. And Ricky's become the driver he is, I think, with the help of Anthony. And he says that he doesn't deny that he did indeed envision reuniting with Hudson O'Neal. He says, was it a desire? Yeah, it was there. And we get a little bit more information here about he might have thought, he did think about that 2-car team. Obviously, he says we talked a lot before the Rocket 1 ride. He gives advice that he thinks that's where Hudson should have been in the Rocket 1 ride. But then after he left the Rocket 1 ride, he says this. He says, was going to try to do something together as a 2-car team, but that didn't work out people-wise and everything. People-wise and everything right there. So, again, this might be maybe the real reason what happened here. There is a rumor going on out there that Ricky Thornton Jr. did not want to be a teammate to Hudson O'Neal. Obviously, he has no problem having a teammate, joining Kohler Motorsports and Jimmy Owens being his teammate now. But it's unclear what exactly Burns means here when he says people-wise, whether that is there was maybe a conflict there between Ricky Thornton Jr. and Hudson O'Neal, although he said there was no personality conflict earlier in this interview. But then it could also mean something like they just didn't have enough crew members to field 2 teams or something like that. That could be an issue, what he's talking about there with people-wise. Again, open to interpretation. But he goes on, so we was going to help him what we could and let him do his thing. He's learned a lot in the last 2 months of doing it, and I'm really jealous of what he's built on his own in the last 2.5, 3 months since he left Rocket. We've talked a lot about things, and he was headed in the right direction. And then he goes on to kind of talk about what the plan is with Hudson O'Neal and how they are going to be moving forward and kind of chasing this championship, and a little bit of like some anecdotes about how he had continued to maintain his relationship with Hudson over the year and was in communication with him throughout the year, etc. Go with them going to watch Burns' son Austin compete in a demolition derby, etc. So that is kind of the latest from SSI Motorsports' owner, Todd Burns, what he had to say. I think, as I've said repeatedly throughout this video here, that I think he just opens up more questions. I don't think he answers a lot, and I think it would have been better off to just say, hey, Ricky released his press release. We have now hired Hudson O'Neal, and we're moving forward, and we're not planning to talk about the details of why SSI Motorsports and Ricky Thornton Jr. split. And I think that would have been the better path to go. Those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know in the comments below.